All right. Awesome, Cory. Thank you very much for joining me.
Yeah.
So, man, you're hunkered down right now for coronavirus issues, the stay-at-home orders. What are you doing to stay in shape and stay ready for what's next?
I mean, not really a whole lot, man. I can kind of only train in the basement. Colorado has one more week left of this quarantine stuff, hopefully. So, I mean, I just been in the basement working out. I've been trying to work out like 2 hours a day, like lifting stuff, running,
Yeah.
hitting the taekwondo paddle. It's getting really boring though, man. Like you can only shadow
Oh,
box
yeah.
so many hours in a week until you're kind of sick of it.
I believe it. It's hard to stay motivated, but you're in an interesting spot. You're number 4 in the world right now at bantamweight, and I mean a lot of good fights for you coming up that could be made. Anyone in particular? I know you've done a few interviews lately, kind of talking about the top 4 there and figuring out who would be next. Seen some news about Dominic Cruz getting a fight. So who do you kind of have your eyes on coming out of this situation?
Um, so it's kind of hard to tell, man, because I don't really know how important it is to even fight up in a rank. You know, like I don't really
Yeah.
know that that's the most important thing right now. Especially with I don't is Aldo even ranked in the division right now? I think he's like
No, just
he's not.
leapfrogging
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, but even like Aldo, like Aldo's not ranked, Frankie's not ranked, but I think that those guys would maybe do just as much for me as I think, probably even more than maybe an Aljamain fight or a Jan or a Moraes. So it's like I
Yeah.
don't know, man. I really don't know. I'm supposed to kind of know. I think the UFC right now is kind of just getting their feet back and trying to like sort out. I think just May.
Right.
Um, which I think I would prefer to fight in June just because that would give me some time after this quarantine thing ends for me to be able to actually train
Right.
with someone. uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
so to be honest, I'm not really sure. They're supposed to come back with me with some options, probably in the next couple of weeks once they figure out May, and then. But I mean, I was high on Aljamain before, but then I started thinking about it, and I don't really think it matters that much as long as it's kind of either up in the ranks or a really big name like a Frankie or a Jose. So that's kind of where I am. You know, I'm kind of open to a lot
Yeah.
of options.
No, I mean I think that makes sense. It's something I hadn't thought about prior to you mentioning it, but man, those would be big names for the resume. You know, bigger than like you're saying potentially the guys ahead of you or even the guys next to you like Aljamain. Obviously, those are good wins and big wins for the division, but having a Jose Aldo on the resume it would be nice looking.
Oh yeah, that would be amazing. Could you imagine?
That'd
I
be
don't
a
know that.
sick fight too.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, right. I don't know that Aljamain or Jose is in a position where he would maybe take a fight against me, but because I think that I don't know, maybe the UFC. I kind of feel bad for the guy, man. I think that the UFC. I semi hope that they gave him or they kind of promised him a title shot after this one, because I
Right.
mean, could you imagine you're set to fight for a world championship and then all of this happens and then they just give it to a guy that's allowed to leave the country or not leave the country, but I
Right.
mean, Jose can't leave the country. It's completely out of his hands. I feel bad for the dude, but
Wouldn't
yeah, having
surprise
it,
me at the same time.
yeah, having Jose on the resume would be sweet though.
Yeah, maybe at Fight Island. That's how we can get around that visa stuff.
Yeah, I've heard a few things about Fight Island. I don't think it's going to be what everyone thinks it's going to be.
Sure. So cool. So I mean, not able to do too much. Obviously, certainly not with a partner. And I mean, your style, I would think, kind of you want to have that partner training because it is so much around timing and footwork and having your flow down. And when you're on, it's beautiful to watch. So I agree with you. I mean, I think maybe waiting a little bit, at least you get that partner back and you get the game speed, per se, or the timing back, and then get a big name like that on your resume. That'd be cool.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. That's ideal, but I mean, who knows, man? Especially with all of this happening, like who knows? Like, I could even see a situation where maybe like a Sun Sao knocks out Garbrandt, or Garbrandt knocks out a Sun Sao, and then he's probably ahead of me at that point too. So I think for me, it's just more important that I get a fight and I stay active and I stay
Yeah.
relevant. But yeah. I think that my style is really footwork based, obviously. So, I mean, at least I'm able to do that. I mean, at least I'm able to kind of keep my feet active and moving, and
Right.
remembering how to fight, even though it might be a little bit different. But shadowboxing is a huge thing for me, man. If I'm not shadowboxing, then I'm not able to really do what I do. So that at least
Right.
hasn't been taken away from me.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you work off a lot of feints, and those feints you can work at home and stuff. So, I mean, paint me a picture kind of what a normal week looks like, kind of just training in general. Because you do this full time, you have for quite some time now. What does a normal week of training outside of coronavirus look like for you?
Yeah, so I guess that's going to be it's usually one hard practice a day at least, um, except for Wednesdays. Wednesdays I still do 3 practices, but they're a little bit drill based, so I'm not getting my heart rate too high. I'm not breaking too much of a
Mm-hmm.
sweat, but at least one of the days there's a hard practice. Every day is a drilling day, so I do like 1 hour 15-minute hard practice, 1 hour of drilling, and then usually, if that's not the end of the day, then it'll be like a morning lift or some type of run or something. So that's usually 3 days out of the week. So I think Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturdays are 3 a days, and then the other days are 2 a days. Um, and I know that sounds like a huge workload. It's more of a workload on the mind, only because it's like a lot of reps. It's like a lot of drilling. I'm constantly working on, I call them my projects. So like things that I'm not as good at yet, those are my projects. So I have to drill my projects, and then I have to try to incorporate them into sparring and wrestling and MMA training and stuff. So it's a lot of learning, man. I'm at the point where I'm just trying
Yeah.
to learn as much as I can, because I've learned that that's the most important part about this. The more knowledge you have about all the techniques and what's happening in the fight, the better you're going to be. It's not so much about being the best athlete. It's about who can be the smartest.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I love the approach, and it shows in your fights. I mean, you're dynamic within it. You're fighting everywhere, whether it goes to the mat or it's on the feet. You're changing things up. You're changing your footwork up. You're feinting. I mean, like you said, it's a lot of pieces to your game that it does sound like you have to work on a regular basis, and that's interesting to me because I ask a lot of people in here. Is it something that are there things that you work on that you're trying to get better at outside of fight camp? And usually, it's nothing. It's kind of just, oh, I want to round out my skills. But you have something in your mind that you're constantly trying to work on and improve.
Oh yeah, every single day. So usually, so every day I drill. Usually it's in the evening, as like the end of the day type thing. So usually from like 7 to 8, I'll drill. Sometimes it doesn't go that long if I don't have like newer things to work on, or I'm not exploring a position. But usually for like the first 20 or 30 minutes, it's just reps of whatever we're going over, and like that gets old. But like if you don't do it, then you're not gonna know it. It's like
Right.
it's like studying for a test, man. If you want to get an A on it, like you gotta be bored as hell and go over all of the stuff that you even already know. So usually the drill sessions are about 20, 30 minutes of that, and then the last 30 minutes is like me being like, okay, I'm either getting to this position a lot, or I'm messing this position up, and how do I either not mess it up, or how do I have an answer for when I do mess it up, so that it's not really a mess up anymore. So
Yeah.
first 20 30 is about just repping. Second 20 to 30 is just explore new positions, and that's kind of my most fun part of training right now, is just me figuring out stuff for myself. And I feel like I'm kind of at the point where I can make up my own stuff now, and it works. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't have to necessarily learn it all from other people. Now it's like a lot of like, this is happening a lot, so let's answer in like a different way than what everyone else is doing, because that goes a long way when you're fighting someone for only 15 or 25 minutes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean it's interesting seeing the different styles at the top. Your style is very different from Marlon, very different from Jose, very different from Cejudo, and Cejudo is very different from all of them. His game's very dynamic, and his game really changes fight to fight. And I feel like we've seen that with you too. Um, you know, Reddit's a big community and very supportive of MMA, and they love you right now. They're posting videos about your each one of your fights and your finishes, And you can see the progression from fight to fight, clearly reinforcing the idea that, what you're doing is working. What you're doing by trying to figure out these new things to implement in your game, it's certainly working. And it seems that the people at the top are doing that. So it's cool to see.
Yeah, it's fun. I've been kind of in that way of thinking for maybe kind of a little bit the whole time, but really taking it by the reins probably last maybe year and a half. And I would say that I would, well, one, a lot of credit goes to Christian, because Christian Allen, my head coach, my striking coach, but also MMA coach too. Christian kind of like taught me that it's okay to be very creative in the sport. You don't have to you don't have to do, and it doesn't have to look like what it looks like for everyone else.
Yeah.
Which I know Bruce Lee was really big on too. Bruce Lee was big on fighting without fighting, right? Like that was his style, or no way as way. So that's kind of the approach that I've really, really adopted in like the last year and a half. But I think that it obviously takes a lot of time and confidence in yourself in order to kind of get to that point. I wish that I would have kind of had that mentality a little bit earlier, but I would also maybe attribute a lot of it to Ryan Hall. I've been training with him a lot more, kind of visiting him out in DC. And then like we'll stay in touch and kind of just talk fights sometimes too. But Ryan Hall has been a huge person where his jiu-jitsu is insane. Like it's better than I think anyone in the entire world. And just watching how he approaches new moves and how he's doing things, and how he kind of just clears the slate on what he thinks he knows about a position and then comes up with his own stuff has really inspired me to kind of do that in all realms of grappling and striking also. So I kind of feel like the pieces are really, they've been like plugged in perfectly for me. You know, like I had a coach that wasn't strict for the whole time that I've been doing this, as far as him making a bunch of decisions for me, him setting a regimen for me, him telling me what is right and what is wrong. I never got that. And then it was really reinforced when I went to train with Ryan and I saw that he kind of had the same philosophy on stuff. And I mean, had Christian done MMA, he would have been a UFC champ if it was now, you know. And then Ryan, I think, is I mean, his jiu-jitsu is just like unparalleled. So if those two guys are doing it, then that's what I got to be doing too, you know.
Right. That's super interesting. And Hall's got a cool game too. I mean, his jujitsu, like you said, is so good. He's so good off his back that he can throw these wild techniques, these flashy techniques, and not really be concerned about it. And it seems to me like obviously you're very good with the footwork and the distance, but you don't seem to have too much concern about being taken down either necessarily, or at least that takedown attempt. You seem to be pretty comfortable defending it, and then even on the ground, scrambling and defending and doing jujitsu from there too.
Yeah. It took me a really long time to not have to stress about wrestling someone in a fight. I think it's just a confidence thing too. Like I've always been a decent wrestler, you know. Like I didn't grow up wrestling, but when I would go with really high level guys, I would always do pretty decent. And even when it was just along the lines of like just wrestling rules. But in a fight, man, like I think it's just different, man. It's not.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys, if they put us in like an NCAA wrestling tournament rule style wrestling, then yeah, they're gonna beat my ass because I don't even know the rules of those.
Sure.
But we're not wrestling, we're fighting. So
Right.
it doesn't matter if you score 2 points and get a takedown, but I just hop back up to my feet, or I scramble up, or I scramble into a position where I can be at an advantage with my jiu-jitsu instead of you just being able to hold me down. So like I said, man, that's kind of the exploration part where it's like I spend a lot of time. I would almost argue like everyone wants to say that they're the hardest worker, the hardest. Yeah, that's usually the biggest one. Like, oh, I'm the hardest worker in the room. I'm the hardest worker in the room. But I would say that I'm giving the most thoughtfulness to my game, and I think that that's kind of what separates me than the rest of the guys. Is I'm like, I have a plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G, you know, like there's no end to like, I never put myself in a position where I don't know what I'm doing, and I think that
Yeah.
that's what it brings a lot of confidence to a fight too, which I think you see, which is why I can go do I feel like whatever I want, because I'm like, well, I know what I'm doing everywhere. So even if it's the worst spot and the worst, I know that I practice those positions over and over and over again too. So,
Right.
so that's what it is. It's a lot of thoughtfulness is the word I would use.
Yeah, very cerebral approach, and you spoke to the confidence in your style and your abilities, and it's impressive seeing that against someone like a John Lineker, where your style, it evolved from the previous fight, but you weren't necessarily doing anything different than what you normally do. You were still pushing the pace, you were pushing him backward, picking your shots, even though. Arguably he's a frightening man to fight. He's a powerful man. He's a good, packs a lot of power in his punches, and he goes for the finish. So it was impressive to me just seeing that. I mean, is that part of that? Part of just the drilling over and over, and just knowing your style and feeling comfortable with it and being confident in that allows you to go put on that display against someone as dangerous as that?
Yeah, that was definitely hands down my scariest fight. We were actually supposed to fight the fight before that one. So um,
Okay.
yeah, so I was supposed to fight Almeida, and then Almeida pulled out of a fight, and Cruz was supposed to fight Lineker, and then
Hmm.
Cruz pulled out of that fight. So me and Lineker got matched up, and then Lineker actually pulled out of that fight. So I got a replacement on 2 weeks' notice. I got Mario Batista on, I
That's
think it
right.
was either 2 or 3 weeks' notice, but that was, I think, in January, and then UFC still liked the me and Lineker fight, so they gave me and Lineker that fight in April. So when we were getting ready for that, I think we had like 3 or 4 weeks the first time to get ready for Lineker. And I
Yeah.
remember sitting with my coach, and I was like, man, I'm okay with this, but I wish that we had 2 more weeks to get ready, because I hadn't fully figured out the puzzle yet. Everyone's
Right.
just everyone's just a puzzle. Everyone's body shape and style and what
Oh
they
yeah.
bring to the table. It's just a puzzle. And some puzzles take longer to figure out than other puzzles. But that one I hadn't had figured out the first time, and it made me a little nervous. He ended up pulling out, but the second go around, I felt better because I had a lot of time to kind of put forth an actual game plan that I thought was very solid.
Oh yeah.
Um, so
And
so getting ready for those types of fights, really getting ready for anyone, it's trying to find someone that's going to be able to mimic his movements, trying to find out his style of fighting, how he moves, what he does, all of that, and then figuring out how to best stop what he does that's good, and that usually takes a couple weeks. So for me, the most stressful time of getting an opponent is always those first 2 weeks when I don't know how we're going to solve this puzzle. It usually takes maybe 2, maybe 3 weeks for me to like play around with stuff in those sessions that I'm talking about, those drill sessions. Usually takes about 2 or 3 weeks, and then I feel like I have a very solid plan, and then I'm confident because I've spent so much time, on just those little subjects. So
right. Yeah, and I mean, it looked good. There's not many people that really put it to Lineker the way you did. I mean, 3 rounds, and you clearly outscored him, outstruck him the whole time. So it's definitely impressive, and your work showed. So it's cool. But
yeah, thanks.
so I mean, you're 5-0 now in the UFC, 3 finishes, I think, and on a 7-fight win streak. So I mean, you're in this place where, I guess, relatively maybe to the other guys at the top, not as many UFC fights, but you're on a long win streak. You're on 7-fight win streak. They're impressive finishes. I think you have 5 finishes within that 7-fight win streak overall, and then 3 out of the 5 in the UFC. So, I mean, in my opinion, that does make a strong argument for a title contender fight or number one contender fight. And but you're saying that you're kind of willing to wait and see what happens at the top of the division and take another fight. Um, do you want a title shot this year? I mean, is that something where you feel like time is of the essence, or are you okay with taking a couple of fights in the meantime?
For the last, I think, 2 years, I've had on my board. I do like a gratitude goals board in the morning. Sometimes I slack on it, but usually when I'm in fight camp, it's every day. But
Yeah.
on my board, I have my affirmation on there, and one of the affirmations is that I'm going to be the champ in 2020. So I don't know.
Cool.
I've had that on there, I think, 2 or 3 years now. So uh, will it happen?
Wow.
Will it happen? I've lined up everything that I need to be doing, right? So
Yep.
I've been doing everything that I feel like I need to be doing, that goes along my value system. Like, as far as, like, I'm not going to personally try to offend anyone or
Right,
uh,
right.
cre-
Turn heel.
create. Yeah, I don't want to create any more stress in people's lives than they already have to go through, to be honest.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's how I would want to be treated, and I try to treat my opponents, and not even my opponents, I call them my peers more. I try to
Hmm.
treat my peers the exact same way. So I don't really like the idea of me being the cause of someone else's stress or someone else's sadness, as kind of like soft as that sounds. um, I don't like the idea of that. It doesn't line up with my value system. So outside of that, I think I'm doing everything that I need to be doing. I'm getting better. I'm creating my own game. I'm being different every single time that I go in. Good fights are landing in my lap. Uh,
Yeah.
I was supposed to fight Frankie in January. That just landed in my lap. So I think that I'm doing everything that's right, man. I think that it's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
And the stars kind of lining up. Other people have had stars line up differently. Mine are lining up in a different way, and I'm okay with that. I'm the number 4 guy after, I think, 2 years and 5 fights.
Right.
So
That's
that
sick.
that's pretty good. But that being said, it's not enough for me. I mean, I want bigger fights. I want to obviously be a world champion at this. So it's not enough, but I just take it day by day. That's all that I can do.
Yeah, I love the perspective, and I agree. I think you're doing everything within your control to put yourself in that position. Um, so I want to kind of hear about how you got to this point, because, like you said, you're the number 4 bantamweight in the world, 5-0 in the UFC, 7-fight win streak, titles pretty much in every organization that you fought in up to this point. But before we dive into kind of your journey up to this point, who would you say your scariest, or what fight were you most nervous for going into?
Probably, I fought this guy. His name was Tahino Gaval. I fought him in LFA. It was my second fight before I had gotten signed to the UFC. Um, and the reason I was nervous about Tahino is because, like I said, like, I like to have tape on guys, and I like to figure out how I'm gonna beat them. Uh, and this guy, it was coming off of my first loss too. So and I took that loss really hard because I had attached a lot of who I was with being a winner and a fighter.
Right.
And when that didn't happen, it kind of gave me a little bit of a identity crisis, I suppose you could call it. And then I kind of situated that. I took some time off, and I was ready to fight again. But I was still kind of borderline, like, I don't even know if I want to do this, because it hurt real bad to lose. Like, I felt like I
Yeah.
lost part of myself. It hurt really bad. So um, after that, I was still kind of borderline, like, do I want to fight yet? I feel like I still have some things to figure out. And then they offered me that guy, and this guy is just this jacked Brazilian dude who the only tape that we could find of him is him just knocking people out in the first minute of every fight. So
Yeah.
I remember they offered him to me. I didn't watch tape on him. I was at the gym with Elliot. Me and Elliot sit down and watch tape on him, and we YouTube his name, and it's just KO after KO after KO. And Elliot's like, I think that this is a good fight. And I was like, what? I was like, oh yeah, and what? In which one of those videos were you like, yeah, this is a good idea, especially coming off of a loss. He was like, he's too slow, man. Look at everyone that he's fighting is slow, and I was like, all right, man, whatever. If you think it's a good idea, I'll do it. And and that had me up at night, man, because I didn't want to feel the pain of losing again. Uh,
Yeah,
but
I
I,
bet.
but it was one of my best performances. Like, it's
Yeah.
I've kind of learned to embrace the big hitter get knocked out fear, because for me that kind of plays into my game more. You know.
Right.
But yeah, that was definitely the scariest fight I think I've had yet.
Awesome.
Besides
Yeah.
maybe my first amateur fight,
Sure. 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 As
just
far as
because
nerves.
just because you're yeah just because you're nervous as hell, and when you don't know what
Yeah.
the hell you're doing.
Yeah, well, you finished the fight that you were speaking about by first round KO, and then I think your teammate just fought him recently too, Joshua Marsh, right? Relatively new teammate,
Hmm.
but I thought he did enough to win that. But whatever. Judges see something
Yeah,
different.
yeah,
Um,
close one. It was his hometown too, I think.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. What's interesting about your style to me too, that you said that you kind of developed the style and it is very different, is you see people from your gym kind of emulate, or not kind of, they are emulating your style, and it's effective for them too because it is so different compared to maybe a traditional Muay Thai or traditional kickboxing style, with the footwork, with the movement, with the lean and more, and it seems to be working. So you're clearly not only making it work for yourself, but giving back to your gym because you train with Team Elevation, but you also your home gym is High Altitude Martial Arts, and then you coach there too, right?
Yeah. I teach the kids program there, or at least the kickboxing kids program, and then a few MMA classes now, and then a few kickboxing classes. And yeah, I have a few guys that I've really kind of I feel like taken underneath my wing and been like, hey man, like you don't have to do it exactly like me, but these are things that you have to be able to do. And I'm a really big believer, unless you're just this killer of a wrestler and you don't care if people grab you. Um, if you lock yourself in a cage with someone and they can run over to you and grab you and you can't do anything about that, you're going to lose a fight eventually.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true.
yeah, it's true, right? So like, or you're going to run into someone who's like the fucking Terminator. And if you can't control the distance between you and him, and he can run up to you and punch you whenever he wants to punch you, and there's nothing you can do about it, you're gonna lose a fight eventually. So for
Yeah,
me, it's all about like you need to be in control of the fight. It can look like whatever you want, but you need to be the one that's in control of the fight. And the one that's in control is the one that's controlling the distance. If someone comes at me and I can make them not be able to touch me, then I'm controlling that fight. Um, so that's why I instill in the guys, some of them are a little bit better wrestlers. And I'm like, listen, if you're going to be able to control the fight by grabbing this guy, you better be really good at grabbing him. Uh,
yeah,
and then if you're not as good at wrestling or or say maybe that's not the right verbiage, but if you're not wanting to engage in the wrestling as much, then you need to be able to defend yourself by space, and how you do that is by
mm,
moving your feet. So that's what it is, man. It's a defensively minded fighting style, but it puts you in a lot of positions for you to actually be really aggressive and control the fight too. So
yeah,
yeah, those guys that emulate uh, my style make me really happy, just because it's nice to see that's working for other people too, and it's not just me.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So like we said, you're over at High Altitude Martial Arts, and then you also train with Team Elevation. You mentioned Christian Allen is kind of your primary coach, striking MMA, and you also brought up Elliot Marshall as far as another coach. Who else do you primarily work with as far as coaches, and who do you have in your corner for fights?
Yeah, so Dave Zabrinski I'll also have in the corner. So it's Christian, Elliot, and Dave usually. I do. Dave is the hardest working coach that I think I've maybe seen. He's the coach that he has the least amount of MMA experience, but he really makes up for it in how he's really willing to do anything that you ask of Dave. Um, so that's I mean, and you need a good balance of everything. And Dave's kind of that guy. Dave's the guy that will work his ass off in order to make things easier on you, either the week of the fight or throughout whatever training camp. He'll make things easier. I've also been doing a lot of wrestling drills with Banks, Carrington Banks.
Yeah,
Um,
smothering wrestling game.
yeah, he's kind of a humble guy, but I think that he's like a really, because I don't really know too much about wrestling. Like when I hear wrestlers talk about like what tournaments and camps they won and stuff like this, I'm like, yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know what that means. Like, uh, and I don't really have a super technical minded wrestling game either, where I like am like, oh, he's doing that position wrong. Like
right.
I kind of know, but not at like a very, very high level. And I think that I think that Banks is at that very, very high level because we've been doing a lot of drilling. I've been helping him with his striking a little bit, and he's been doing a lot of wrestling with me. And I think that he won't say it, but man, I think he's like one of the better wrestlers that I've probably ever engaged with, because he's able to like he really, really knows what he's doing. And I'm like, oh shit, I can actually learn how to wrestle now. Like after drilling with him and having him explain to me, I'm like, oh, I finally understand this game. Like it's just another one of those games where it's like you gotta know more than the other person. And I'm like, oh, I can actually know a lot of stuff and not just be an athlete and kind of like know the certain techniques. I can actually play the game of wrestling. So he's helping me play the game of wrestling a lot now. So
cool. Yeah, the benefit of being at a big powerhouse gym like you're at. I mean, you've been there since the beginning, really, but it's cool having him, the Gages of the world. I mean, endless numbers of guys that are at the highest levels right now, whether it's LFA, UFC, Bellator, or whatnot, in your gym, training with you, getting rounds in with you as well. So, I mean, yeah, it's invaluable experience having all that knowledge in the gym for you.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I've been really lucky, man. I've been really blessed. Like I said, dude. I don't think I would change anything. The gym I signed, I started at High Altitude, which was Nate Marquardt's gym, who was like the man at the time, and I had no idea who Nate Marquardt was even.
He's one of the
And
reasons
then,
I moved to.
oh really?
Yeah. Just the
Yeah,
idea of potentially being able to train with Nate Marquardt.
yeah, yeah. And I didn't even know who he was. I just saw that he fought in the UFC, and I was like, oh, it's close to my house in Aurora, so cool. And then when I went to school, just got lucky and went to CU Boulder. And then Easton's was up there, which was affiliated with High Altitude, which was affiliated with Grudge. And then I started going to the pro practices at the Grudge and Easton's team. And then Muscle Farm came around, and then it was the Muscle Farm team. And it's just like, I mean, I don't think I could have gotten luckier, man. Like the stars lined up really, really well for me to be able to be where I'm at.
Absolutely. I mean, you still have to put in the work, but it's definitely a good environment that's been built around you for sure.
Yeah, that the putting in work part is never, I don't think, the hard part for most people. Like I see people from other gyms and I'm like, you might be a workhorse, man, but if the guy that's teaching you all the stuff only knows so much, you're only going to know so much too, unless you go to,
True.
unless you sign up somewhere where the other guys know a lot more than you, and it's just hard to watch. But I don't feel like I've been in that situation ever in my entire
No.
career, which is awesome.
Yeah. Well, and with all these guys in the gym, it sounds like Elevation does a good job of keeping egos in check. But obviously, everyone's trying to be the best fighter in the world. Things could get heated. Do you have hard sparring sessions in camp? Because it sounds like you have this very finesse approach, very drilling oriented approach. Do you have hard sparring during the week?
My hard sparring now is my fast sparring. So I try to spar
Okay.
as fast as I
Cool.
can, instead of sparring as hard as I can. Which just means I just try to pitch shutouts every single round when I'm in training camp, right? So it's not about like how much am I hurting this person. It's more about like how much am I embarrassing him.
Yeah. Yeah.
How much am I making him feel like he doesn't belong in there with me? And that's what I go
Same
into the
fight
fights.
style.
Yeah, and that's what I go into the fights doing too. I definitely would be a liar if I said that I didn't used to spar very hard and
Sure.
think that that's how this culture was. And I think that the trend of not training as hard is becoming um, a lot more relevant now, because you can't get hit in the head that much. Like
Right.
you just can't. Um,
Yeah.
and I got a whole life to live after this, and I'm not gonna be the dad or the husband or wherever my future leads to. I'm not gonna be the person that's a half a beat behind just because I wanted to prove to other people that I was tougher than them. You know.
I love it.
Um,
Yeah.
yes. So for me, it's not about sparring hard. And to be honest with you, man, I don't really feel like it ever even needs to be done. It does happen, right? Like I still will pick it up sometimes.
Sure.
But again, it's more about like, all right, how fast can I be? How embarrassing can I make this for this person? And and how much can I just shut them out? And I kind of really realized that was a reality and a truth when I fought Mario Batista, because when I fought Mario Batista, I felt like complete trash before I walked out.
Huh.
My body wasn't waking up. Like, I had just zero pop in anything. And I think in the past that would have led me to be very, very unconfident in the fight. But when I was moving around in the back and I didn't feel like I could punch hard, and I didn't feel like I was going very fast, in my head I was just like, well, I know I can tech spar for 3 or 4 or 5, however many tech sparring rounds need to be done. I know that I can at the very least do that. And that's what I went out in the fight and did. And I was like, okay, I don't feel very good, but at least I know that I can do this. And then it ended up working really well. And I was like, man, it doesn't need to be really heavy. Like, it just doesn't need to be that, you know. Sorry, that was a little long winded, but
No, no.
it doesn't need to be that. It can be just embarrassing the person. That's what I think in my
Yeah.
head. It's anytime I catch myself mad, instead of me being like, I'm gonna hit this person hard back, now it's like, this person doesn't even get to touch me now. So that's where my head goes.
Yeah, that's what I was going to touch on. I mean, the emotional aspect of it. It must be a lot more fun. I mean, to fight when you're trying to embarrass a person as opposed to being mad and getting frustrated when you get touched and feeling like you have to get them back right away 2 times as hard.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to choose, I would rather get my ass whooped than just, but in a way where it's like, this person isn't really beating me, but they're beating my ass. I would rather that than have someone just toy with me, you know,
Right.
and
No,
just feel,
sure,
and
sure.
just be the mouse that the cat is playing with before it eats it.
Yep.
I would much rather be in a two cat fight where or where the two cats are going crazy on each other. I'd much rather be in that fight than be the mouse that's just being toyed with.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you mentioned that you were feeling sluggish, not feeling the best before the Batista fight, because that was another first round finish. And the saying is champions find a way to win on their worst days. So I mean that's got to be confidence building into the future as well, knowing that hey, you showed up on the worst day that you feel like you possibly could have to that fight, and we're still able to get a first round finish against top talent. I mean, in the UFC, it doesn't matter who you are; it's top talent in the world.
Yeah, it's fun, man. Like that's what I think one of the main things that attracts me about actual fighting, because fighting and martial arts to me are not really the same thing. Uh,
Right.
I fight because I want to see if my martial arts work, but martial arts is just different, you know. So fighting is a part where you can learn more about yourself in martial arts. So for me, every fight is an opportunity to do so. I don't try to make every single fight the exact same. I don't stress myself out if I don't feel the same, if I'm not lively enough, if I feel like my body isn't waking up, if I haven't put on the same amount of weight the next day. None of that matters to me. Every experience is a new experience, and if you try to make it the same every single time, you're just missing out on a new experience,
Yeah.
and a new learning opportunity. And that's one of my favorite things about fighting, because you learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about yourself in those moments.
Beautiful mentality. So take me back then. Help me understand kind of how you got to this point in your career. So when was the first time you walked into a martial arts gym, and what got you to do it?
Yeah, I don't know how old I was when I started Taekwondo, but I did Taekwondo, but never competitively.
Sure.
Um, it was just like something my parents want. I did, just as a kid. Didn't really do it for that long. But I did that as a kid. I always enjoyed watching fighting and boxing. I did. I played basketball my whole life. Just to be honest with you, man, a lot of my life was just, how cool can I be?
Sure.
So
Sure.
that I was good at basketball. I I uh, I did well in basketball. I had friends on the basketball team, so I just played basketball. I remember one year I wanted to wrestle, um, and I told my mom that I wanted to wrestle, and she told me I wasn't allowed to wrestle if they wrestled in singlets. And so that got shut down when I was in high school. So I just played basketball, but I was always a fan of combat. And then basketball was finishing up in high school, and I didn't really like it anymore. I was like, I was really into watching the WEC and the really early
Yeah.
UFCs during that time, and I loved watching that. So I was like, I'll just sign up at a gym and kind of see what it's like. So I remember at the time, my senior year, I was going to basketball practice, which I think was from 3:30 to 4 or 5 or so. I think 3:30 to 5, and then I would go to high altitude and be there until about 9 o'clock at night, training with Christian and Cody and some of the older coaches. And then I was doing that, I think, my senior year, and then when I graduated, went up to Boulder. But I don't really have too much of an inspiring story other than I just saw fighting on TV and I thought that it was cool, and being cool was important to me, and so I signed up for it, luckily, and then I learned that that's not the most important thing in the world,
Yeah.
which is kind of a funny irony, but yeah, that's kind of how it started, man. I don't really have a cool story. It was just kind of,
I,
hey, I'll do this, and I was good at it, just from having I think an athletic background, and then got hooked up with the situation that I was in, just being around good people, good coaches, and yeah, worked hard.
I mean, I think that's one of the cool parts about the sport, how approachable a lot of the people are, how approachable martial artists are. How you train next to them in the gym. It's not like you're going to run into an NFL player at your local gym for the most part, you know? So, I mean, I don't know that it's a lack of an inspirational story. I think it's more cool because it's very approachable. It's very, anybody, you know, theoretically could do what you've done if they put in the time and the work and the mental focus and everything that you've done across this time. How long did it take for you to be training to where you thought, hey, maybe I should go test my skills and fight?
Yeah, so that's another interesting one because I think I was 18 when I did my first Muay Thai tournament. I think it was the first one,
Okay.
the first Muay Thai Colorado tournament that they had. That was the first tournament that I had done. So I think I was 18
Cool.
at the time. I remember me and Sean Madden, we both did it. I knew we were both getting ready because I that was when I was in college at that time. And Sean would come pick me up, I think, at 6 a.m. in the morning, and we would go hit mitts before classes start, getting ready for that tournament. Uh, and then we'd go to class, and then at night we'd train again. And so that was, I think, my first tournament. And again, I was just kind of doing it just for fun. Like, I took it pretty serious though, just because I'm the type of guy that if I'm going to do something, I want it to be at the highest potential that I can. So it wasn't like I was uh, not trying, but I definitely didn't have the expectations that I would be where I am right now. I would say that maybe that started happening when I was maybe 19-ish, because that's, I think, when I started going to Grudge and training with all of the pros there. And that's when I found my niche, like I was in college, I was 19 years old. I didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
I was like, and they were nice. They were nice to me. It was fun. It was a community, and I was like, this is perfect. I'll dedicate my life to this. And
Cool.
then ever since then, it was just, how do I be able to get to the gym the most? So even in college, I remember taking a bunch of BS classes just because they were at like 8 a.m. and then I could go train afterwards, or whatever the situation was. Everything was just training, and school was just something that I did.
Right. Sure.
Something
Sure.
that I didn't work very hard at either.
So when did you take your first MMA fight then?
I think I was 20. Uh,
So you
yeah, I was
trained for
20.
2 years. I mean, did some Muay Thai fights before then, and then what was kind of the trigger to decide that you wanted to test yourself in that realm?
It was people telling me that I was good at it and that I should probably try it. Which is kind of, again, man, like being cool was like an important thing to me my whole life, which is kind of sad.
Sure.
I imagine
You're a
it's not
young
too
man.
different. Yeah, I know. I imagine it's not too different, but it's kind of like, looking back, it kind of just sucks, man, because I think I missed out on I missed out on like a lot of passionate opportunities because I was so focused on that. But yeah, when I was 20, I think that's when I signed up for my first MMA fight, and that was just because people were telling me that I was good at it and that I should probably do it. And I was like, well, I mean, I just enjoy training. I just enjoy, one, the grind of training, two, the learning aspect, and then three, the getting better. All of those things were really fun for me. And then people were telling me I should fight, and I was like, okay, I guess, sure. Um, but I was always allowed to, with Christian, I was always allowed, like, Christian never pushed anything on me, which is one of my most appreciative things towards him, is he never pushed anything on me. He was never one of those coaches that was like, hey, you need to take this fight. Hey, this is a big opportunity to take this fight. It was always like, yeah, man, if you want to do it, you know?
Cool.
And that has really set the tone for, one, the way that I approach fighting in general, where I don't feel like this is something that I need to do. You know, this is something that I genuinely do because it's an actual love of mine, and I really want to see if the shit that I'm coming up with actually works.
Yeah.
And that's the motivation of like why I fight. You know, money is nice, the potential of being a world champion is nice, but to me, it's just this shit is just really fun for me.
Yeah.
And that was really instilled in me when I was just coming up, and it gave me a view and a lens without too much pressure on it, other than the external pressure from other people. But honestly,
Sure.
I really cared about Christian's opinion more than anyone else's as far as this sport went. Um, so yeah, so it was always like, oh yeah, if you want to, man, I can find you something. And it was never a pressure. It was nice, you know. So I didn't feel a lot of pressure to fight, other than oh, I'm good at this. And then it kind of turned into pressure, you know. uh, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. It definitely turns into pressure after you're like, oh, this is really fun, this is really fun, and then you start fighting, and then you start getting really competitive about fighting, and then it's just another stressor in your life. And it's a shame that happens, but I feel like it has to happen, you know. Still
Yeah.
happens sometimes too. Fighting stressful. It sucks to think about if you're gonna get knocked out in a couple weeks, or if you're gonna win, and if you're gonna win double the money, or just the one half of the
Right.
money. And I mean, it's still a stressful process, but at the end of the day, when I come back to who I know I actually am, it's always, listen, man, you don't have to do this shit. You can just train if you want and get better and
Yeah.
coach and whatever.
That's
But
right.
it's just fun for me.
Yeah. I mean, after your first fight, are you thinking at that point that you could make a career out of it? Like, what are you feeling after the first MMA fight?
Yeah, good question. Uh, I don't really know, to be honest. I was excited that I won. I was excited that I did well, but I remember also being like, this is a different animal than training.
Yeah.
I remember thinking that because uh, I remember the first time that I put on MMA gloves before that first fight, and I remember very specifically it was in the back of National Western, where you warm up in that cold ass area by the doors. Uh, and I put on the MMA gloves, and it was my first time like wearing actual grappling MMA gloves. So I put those on, and I go to cover my face, and I realized that these things aren't going to protect me very much. And I was like, whoa, this is real. And then as we're kind of warming up, I'm realizing like, oh man, I don't have shin guards on, I don't have knee pads on, I don't have a shirt on. Like, I'm very naked right now. I remember the vulnerability feeling of being very naked. And then I remember listening to the guy warm up to me on the other side of the curtain, who I was supposed to fight, and him yelling intensely. And I remember being very, very scared. And he kind of had like a thuggish type look to him a little bit. And I remember being like, damn, man, this is real. And then I remember when I was in the fight, I was completely not present at all. And I remember happy about the win, but in the back of my head, I was like, that was not training. That was a real life fight, and that's a different experience. You know, a real life fight is a different experience. When someone's actually trying to hurt you, it's different.
I love it. Appreciate the candid response too. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned about like hearing the person next door hitting pads. I think I heard that Valentina Shevchenko did that to one of her most recent opponents. How the girl heard her hitting the pads next door, and she was like, "Oh my God, this is about to get real." And Mike
Yeah,
Tyson, you hear about those stories. It's funny.
it's easy to have that happen, like
Yeah,
it's really weird how like when you're in such a state of I would call it stress.
yeah,
It's not necessarily a negative stress, but it is definitely this like heightened awareness of whatever's happening in your body that's preparing yourself to get ready for a fight. That
yep.
is a, let's just call it stress. When you're in that heightened feeling of stress, it's really interesting the things that will set you off and just completely throw all of your confidence out of the window. Trying to think of a specific time. Uh, I remember. Okay, so when I was gonna fight Yuri Alcantara,
Right.
I remember I was in the back. I was cool. I was warmed up. Like I was great. They came back and they were like, "All right, you're walking in 2 minutes." And I was like, "Okay, cool, perfect, boom." Was good. And then I think they came back and they were like, "Hey, we're gonna take whatever break, so 15 minutes." And like at that moment, because I was just in that heightened stress feeling, I got overwhelmed with fear, man, where I was just like 15, like for some reason that just threw me off, and
Yeah.
I'm glad that it happened because it teaches you a lot about how bullshit little things are, but how big of a deal you can make those little bullshit things, especially when you're really stressed like that. So that's why I think that you see those and I'll do it sometimes too, but you'll see almost like a cocky type of peacocking type thing,
Oh yeah.
um, just to create more stress, man, because and that's why I do it. That's why I'll point if I know something landed hard, or I'll
Put your arms up.
or I'll throw my hands up. Like
Yeah.
because imagine you're in a situation where you're in the cage with a lot of people watching, like maybe millions, but you're definitely in an arena with at least 10,000 people, and that's just in the arena. So you're at least aware of that number, and
Oh
you're
yeah.
in there, and someone's scoring on you and hitting you, and then they're talking shit to you on top of that. That's
Yeah.
just, the more stressed you get, the stupider you get. So
Yep.
I try to stress people out more, and other people obviously do it too. It takes a little bit of realizing that that's just what other people are doing to create more
Yeah.
stress
Yeah.
in you for that not to work on you. But if you're not aware of that fact, then yeah, that's not a good maybe let's call it, that's not a good fear to have to address right before you're gonna fight.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's what makes your performances so impressive. The fact that there is all this stress and there is all this buildup, but then you're still able to go out there and just flow and you do what you do. I mean, from obviously our experience is very different, but I feel like that's a struggle for me at least, going out there and finding that flow and getting out of your own head and just performing. But at least from the outside looking in, it looks like you're very capable of doing that, handling that stress very well, and then just doing what you've trained to do.
Yeah, and the thing that I would say to that, because I mean that's normal, you know. The thing that I would say is, like when you look back, man, like how many fights you gonna have? Like if you're lucky, you'll have 30, 40 fights. If you're very, very lucky. And do you want those to be? Do you want those to be like hesitant, scared fights? Like that's not what you want it to be, man. And you don't want to fight
Yeah,
like that either. You're not gonna look back and be proud of yourself for fighting like a pussy.
right.
And I fought like a pussy before too, uh, and I've been really like about it. It's not supposed to be eh. These are fun, big, important moments. If you
Absolutely.
love it, and it's kind of like I don't want to look back and be like, I was really scared, like
Yeah,
I don't want that. I want to be like, fuck it, I did my best,
yeah,
and you can go to
absolutely.
sleep happy at the end of the day. You'll always go to sleep happy at the end of the day.
That's right. Nice, nice. So, how many amateur fights did you have before you went pro?
Uh, 15, I think.
Oh
I
wow.
had
Okay.
10. Yeah, I had 10 kickboxing fights. Three of them were in that WKA national tournament. Three of them were in that WKA world tournament.
Nice.
I had
High level stuff.
those. Huh?
High level stuff as an amateur.
Yeah, I was proud of myself for winning that tournament. That was not easy. But it was so yeah. So I had 10 kickboxing fights, and then I think I was 4-1 MMA. So not a ton, not a ton compared to like the kind of Europe circuit, I know,
Sure,
and the
sure.
Thailand and the Brazil guys. Those guys I know have a ton of fights, but yeah, 15 amateur fights I think.
Cool. And then your first pro fight was in 2012. Damar
Is that?
Ortiz. Oh no, that's amateur. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that
2015.
was Amy.
Bruce Sessamon.
Oh yeah,
First
that
KO
yeah.
finish.
Yeah, that fight was weird. That guy was garbage. He wasn't a good guy either. I don't. Well,
Huh.
maybe I shouldn't say that, but he
Maybe he's
wasn't.
turned his life around.
Yeah, I don't know. He was a weirdo, man. Like, dude, he did like a 5 minute wide crew before our fight, and it was an MMA
Oh.
fight, and it was,
Nice.
and bro, and it was in the middle of Williston, one of the Dakotas, South Dakota, Williston, South Dakota, one of the Dakotas. It's an oil town, and it was for one of Seth's cards. And oil people had money, especially back then
Yeah.
when oil was really big. So
Right.
it's all guys like in this hyper masculine culture of like drilling oil and like workers, and it's
Yep.
in this like ice skating rink area, but they obviously didn't have the ice, so they set up the cage there. So it's this fan base that is super hyper masculine from Williston, which is just a weird small town with like a lot of rich people in it. Um, and I think Bruce that Sessman or whoever it is that I fought, that was
Yeah.
Bruce. I think he was from there, but he wasn't like a oil worker. He was just like or maybe he wasn't from there. The guy was just off, He was kind of an
Yeah.
older
Yeah.
guy, had no business fighting professionally at all. Did like a 5 minute wide crew, and the whole time I'm just like, come on, man, like what are you doing?
Get this
And
done.
then and then, so while he's doing the white crew, the entire place is booing because they don't know what the fuck the white crew is, bro. Like, these people just want to see blood, bro. Like, these
Right.
people just want to see blood. Uh, so they're booing the whole time. And then we eventually end up touching gloves and fighting. And then he got really, really upset at me for taking him down and choking him out. And I was like, that's what we're doing, man. And he was like, you said you'd stand with me. Oh, and he came in 14 pounds heavy. He
Oh,
came in
nice.
14,
Nice. Professional.
14, bro. He didn't even try, bro. He came in
That.
14 pounds heavy. And I looked at Christian and I was like, I mean, we're not gonna just go home. So we took the fight
Right.
anyways. It was just a trash situation
Ew.
in every way possible.
So, I mean, after that fight, do you feel like, well, I'm definitely meant to be a pro. I'm handling myself way better than this guy, or did you feel like, well, just on to the next?
Uh, just on to the next. I didn't really appreciate that win that much, to be honest. I remember getting a paycheck afterwards, and I was like, "Oh, that's different." I
Right.
was like, "Oh, cool! I
So,
get paid now." I remember. Oh, that's cool. That's gonna happen every time. Nice.
at that point in your career, are you already set on making this as your full time pursuit? I mean, you mentioned that you dove in and committed, but like, is this what you envision as your future, being a professional fighter at that point?
Yeah, probably even before that. It was
Cool.
about when I
Cool.
started training at Grudge. So when
Okay.
I was about
Right.
19, yeah, 19 or 20, that's when I was like, yeah, this is something that I can really do. And I always had really high ambitions with kind of anything that I was going to commit myself to. So for me, it was either I'm going to be the best at this or I'm going to fall on my face trying. So hopefully it's the former, not the latter, in a few years.
Right.
Or hopefully
Cool.
it's both, man. I hope it's both.
Yeah.
I hope I get to be the best, and then one day land on my face.
Yeah, I mean, and then you won your next five after that. You went five, or your next four, you went 5-0 as a pro. Before you ran into Jamal Emmers, which you spoke about earlier in the conversation. That was your first loss, or first loss as a pro, only second loss overall in MMA. How did that affect you? I mean, were you having second thoughts at that point about this being your career, or did you feel like it was something you could overcome right after the fight?
Oh no, that was a big deal to me. That was something because it was weird because in my head I thought that because we get pumped full of in this culture, we get pumped in our head full of if you just train your mind to believe something, it will do that thing, which was not the case with Jamal. And I think that we do a really poor job in the culture addressing failures and understanding that, like, just because you have this confidence inside of your head doesn't mean that it's going to work out for you because you're fighting another person that has the exact same confidence in his head
Right.
and has worked arguably just as hard as you have. So
Yeah.
I wasn't prepared for failure like that. I remember I lost, and as I was in the middle of the fight, I remember thinking, like, I don't even really want to be here, like that's why I lost. I don't remember anything from the fight. I just wasn't present at all. I just thought it'd be a cakewalk. I was really high on confidence. It was completely unrealistic what I had built myself up to be.
Yeah.
And when I lost, I took it really hard, and it made me question a lot of, like, if I even wanted to do it, because it did make me really sad. Anything that really breaks down the identity wall that we all have built up, anything that completely collapses that, especially if it's as strong as being this, like, macho tough fighter kid that's supposed to be really really good, when that got knocked down for me because it was such a strong wall, it made me question a lot of things. So from there, I just spent a lot of time in the mountains. I think I was probably there at least every other weekend, probably like a Thursday to Sunday, just kind of either by myself or with one other buddy, JD, who I think you had on. Yeah.
Yeah, JD Hardwick.
Yeah. So I spent a lot of time out there just kind of trying to figure myself out and figure out if this is what I wanted to do and who I actually was. And it kind of like led me down this whole path of, like, meditation and being present and how to live uh, with, like, your soul and have that be you instead of whatever mask you want to wear.
Yeah.
Um, and
Well, what a
obviously
great
that's like,
experience.
yeah, perfect. I love it, man. It changed my entire life. It made me not. I wouldn't be who I am right now had that not happened.
Right.
Yeah, so it was an awesome experience. I wouldn't trade it for the world. But it took me down that path, and so I think I probably did that for maybe about 6 months of, like, pretty much a lot of mountain time, a lot of time by myself, a lot of hiking. Took me about that amount of time, and then I kind of started to be like, oh, I'm just the me who's watching who I think I am, and
Right.
that helped me a lot, And
Yeah.
now now it kind of helped me deal with a lot of my egos.
Right.
And obviously that's never ending. I'm never going to be perfect, I don't
Of
think.
course.
And I don't think that that's even really the goal. The goal is to just try.
Yeah.
And uh, and so, yeah, it changed a lot of stuff. So now I can fight really free. I can fight with a
Yeah.
lot of freedom. I don't have I don't have too many fears.
That's great. No, I mean, I love the experience for you, and I love how candid you are about it again. But, to be fair, not to take anything away from the experience, but to be fair, he was very experienced at that time. And he was 10-3. You were 5-0. You were still young in your career, and you ended up making it to UFC before him. So maybe that experience was just, what you needed to get over that edge, like you said.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, the more you or at least I found, the more you, like, settle into who you are, the better things happen,
Oh
like,
yeah.
at least in my experience, man. When I catch myself trying to be someone different than who I know that I actually am, it doesn't work. And the second I realize that, I bring myself back, that's when things really start getting in a groove. And I've gotten pretty decent at that since that Jamal fight and since all that time in the mountains. And I probably owe almost all of my success to that, or else I'd probably still be getting just as sad if I lost or just as happy if I won. Where now it's just, yeah, hey, I won, you know. And I think if I lose, it'll be like, hey, I lost, and that's about as much as it'll be. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah, yeah. Would you take that fight? Would you want that one back, or for you is it just moving forward? And if that happens,
Could
it
care.
happens.
Could,
Yeah.
I could care less, you know.
Cool. Cool.
I get asked that, but no, me and Jamal actually we'll kind of talk on Instagram and stuff too. I saw him actually at that fight, his first fight that he had. That was in Vegas, yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, it was about a month ago. But yeah, I saw him out there, said hi to him. Like me and him are, I wouldn't say buddies, but we're friendly to each other. You know, I don't have any animosity or feeling that like, oh, I need to get this back. Like it's just, man, I learned a lot. I learned a lot from that fight. Cool. If we do ever end up fighting again, then cool. I'm not that way. You know, I'm more of a oh yeah, all right, we'll fight. You know, so we'll see who's better.
Yeah, it was your teammates card, Neil Magny and Austin Hubbard.
That's right.
That's on your card. Neat. Yeah, I mean that's awesome. And then you went on a 7-fight win streak, so clearly it worked out for you. That's the streak you're riding right now. 5 finishes in that, 5-0 in the UFC. So you mentioned, at the beginning of your career is mainly just to be cool or what have you. What are your goals now? I mean, what is the goal from here on out for your career, or martial arts in general, if you want to go that far?
Yeah. I have this picture of a person in my head who is the perfect martial artist, and that's where I want to be. You know, it's not so much about like how many championships can I win, how many big names can I beat, how much money can I make. It's not about that for me. It's like I wake up in the morning and I know that there's projects to be worked on, and those projects will get me closer to the perfect person that I have in my head of being. And that's where I just try to be every day. I just know that like, hey, just put in the work and you'll become that person. You'll become that person. And if I never do become that person, then okay, at least I did my best to do everything that I can in order to become more of that person.
I love it. A true martial artist pursuit. It's awesome. Cool, man. Well, I certainly appreciate your time. It's been a little over an hour now, so I won't hold you any longer. But if you could give a tip to a young fighter for us, or a young aspiring martial artist, just one tip for them, what would that be?
Learn how to learn and fall in love with the learning.
Cool. Nice and simple. I like it. And how can people follow your career online?
I only really use Instagram, so just it's Enter the Sandman 135. And then I started a Facebook fan page, but I don't post a ton on there. But I do post if I do have a fight or something like that. So if you're more on Facebook, Cory the Sandman Sandhagen is on Facebook too.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Dan. That was fun.
It was a blast. That's our show. Thanks for watching. Please take a moment to subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Prize Fighting Business. Follow us on Instagram @PrizeFightBiz, and don't forget to like us on Facebook. Until next time, I'm your host, Daniel Caycedo.